This happened to my best mate's sister's friend. So, yes, there are a few degrees of separation here. However, the story has always stuck with me for over 10 years now since I first heard it. I've never met the person, yet my mate's sister claims that her friend was in tears retelling the story due to just how chilling it is and the horrors of what could have been. The friend's name was Anna. One evening, Anna was driving home from work at the end of a long day. Despite being exhausted after her shift, she is a careful driver and always maintains a sense of awareness of everything going on around her while driving. This includes carefully obeying the speed limit, the road rules, being conscious of the lane that she would be in for any upcoming turns or exits, as well as having a sense of all the other vehicles around her. Driving is not a difficult thing to do. However, heightened caution should always be exercised when behind the wheel. Now, while sitting on a busy motorway, the traffic was relatively heavy from the after-work rush, yet was still flowing without any stops. Every now and then, she would peer into the rearview mirror just to get a sense of the traffic behind her. This white van had been behind her for no longer than a minute and was maintaining a safe distance from her. These glances behind were just a routine autopilot measure to have an awareness of her surroundings. She didn't even look at the person-shaped silhouette driving the van, and more just momentarily gazed at everything in the mirror. She subconsciously acknowledged that a person was obviously driving this vehicle, but did not directly look at them in the very brief moments that she would look back. After a short while of being followed by this van, she takes another look in the mirror. She then automatically reverts her eyesight back onto the road. However, in that extremely short glance, she saw something that instantly darted her eyes back into the mirror, like a double take with just using her eyes instead of turning the whole head. Another figure had emerged on the passenger side of the front seat. They had appeared to have been on the floor of the front seat and had now risen up to be in view. The instant Anna gave a more detailed look in the mirror and actually consciously viewed what she was seeing, her heart dropped. It was a little girl, and she was bawling her eyes out. She had placed both hands on the front windshield screen and was looking directly ahead. She had such a terrified look on her face, one of horror and desperation, that it was painfully obvious that she was in distress. In that instant, the driver of the van reached over and placed his hand directly on her head, shoved the girl back down onto the floor and out of view from anyone outside the vehicle. Anna couldn't believe what she had just seen. She had a look at the person driving the van and saw a guy fitting the exact description of an unwelcoming character. A seedy, hair-thinning, hunched-over, creepy-looking man driving an unmarked van. After briefly processing what she had just witnessed, Anna goes into full panic mode. It all happened so quickly that she's still not sure what she even witnessed was real. She is really exhausted and also trying to concentrate on driving. However, she knows that she needs to act right now in case something malicious is actually happening here. She pulls out her phone and immediately calls 000, the Australian version of 911 for our American friends. And while I don't condone being on the phone while driving, emergencies are an absolute exception. She explains to the officer what she thinks she just saw. She is not even fully finished proving the full account of what had happened before the officer interrupted her. "Can you provide a description of the little girl?" he asks, his voice sharp and professional. "Oh, sure. She was probably no older than 5, had blonde hair. I didn't get a good look." The officer interrupts her again, his voice quick with urgency. "Where are you right now? And what's the description of the van?" Anna could immediately sense the urgency in the air. She gives a rough location of where on the motorway she is, the description of the van, the license plate number, and a description of the guy. The officer thanks Anna and tells her to stay on the phone. She is ordered to listen very carefully and to stay calm. She first requests that Anna try to follow the van. Being in front of the van on a busy motorway, the logistics of getting behind the vehicle may prove tricky. However, the traffic gods were on her side that day, and she was able to change lanes and revert back without any hassles. Anna follows the van while the officer is constantly requesting updates of their location and reassuring Anna that she is doing a good job. The van continues to drive as normal and eventually signals that it is taking an upcoming exit. Anna follows. They continue for maybe 10 minutes, and Anna starts to feel nervous. She's tailgating the van and taking every turn that it does. At one stage, he runs a red light as the van only just made it through the orange. She starts to get the sense that the van driver may know that he's being followed. The whole time, Anna is providing updates of where they are and what turns they make when. Out of nowhere, in a scene much like an action movie, about 4 cop cars swarm on the van. Lights flashing and sirens blaring. They cut the van off and all the traffic comes to a stop suddenly. A bunch of police officers get out and surround the van, guns drawn and screaming at the driver to exit the vehicle. The 000 officer on the phone tells Anna to hang up and to drive away from the scene. She hangs up, however, is unable to move due to the cop cars and the van now blocking the road. She witnesses the man exit the van and lay face down on the ground while a police officer rushes to the passenger side and retrieves the little girl. The man is cuffed and led away, after which officers check the van, guns still drawn and on high alert. This whole time, Anna is almost in a state of shock at what she has just witnessed. Traffic has built up around them now, and people in their cars are wide-eyed in disbelief at what is going on. After a few brief moments, a cop car finally moves, opening up a lane for traffic to continue past the incident with a police officer signaling for cars to go. Anna drives past the commotion and reroutes to her home. She drives all the way home in complete silence, just thinking about what had just happened. She is experiencing so many emotions all at once: fear, disgust, confusion. But after logically piecing together all the events that just happened, she eventually calms to have an overwhelming sense of only one emotion: relief. That girl obviously needed help. The man was obviously planning something nasty. Anna realized that she was so lucky to look back in that mirror when she did, and she was so relieved that she called 000. She began thinking about what may have happened if she had second-guessed what she saw and didn't call in to report it. While she was pulling into her street, she received a call from a blocked number. Usually, she wouldn't answer any blocked or unknown numbers. However, given what had just happened, she picked it up right away. It was the officer, and he opened by again, thanking Anna for calling in and assisting by following the van. The officer then said something that Anna had pretty much already figured out herself. However, it was very validating to have it confirmed. I can't tell you anything about the matter, as it's an ongoing investigation. However, I can tell you one thing. You saved that little girl's life. Anna didn't say a word. She just sat there, the weight of the words sinking in. The relief she had been feeling was suddenly overshadowed by a cold, gnawing feeling in her stomach. She had been in the right place at the right time. But what if she hadn't been? What if she hadn't been paying attention when the van had passed behind her? What if she hadn't made that call? The officer hung up, leaving Anna alone with her thoughts. For the first time in years, she felt like she had truly made a difference. And for the first time in years, she wasn't sure she'd ever look at a white van the same way again. It was a Friday evening when my best friend Liam called. He wanted to know if I'd join him for a weekend getaway to his family's cabin in the woods. No big plans, just a couple of days to get away from the city, unwind, and reconnect. It had been a while since we'd hung out, and honestly, I needed a break from everything, so I didn't hesitate to say yes. The cabin was deep in the woods, far from any town. The drive there was long, winding, and isolated. By the time we reached the narrow dirt road that led to the cabin, the trees had closed in around us, their branches like dark arms stretching across the sky. Liam was in a good mood, telling me stories about his family's history with the cabin, how his grandfather built it years ago, how it had been passed down through the generations, and how it had become their little escape from the world. It all sounded comforting, like nothing could possibly go wrong. We arrived just before sunset, the sky turning into a canvas of orange and purple. The air had that sharp, chilly bite that made your breath visible, even though it was still technically fall. We unpacked, made some snacks, and sat on the porch. The world felt so still, the kind of quiet that gets under your skin, the kind that makes you think maybe there's something lurking just outside your view. By the time we turned in for the night, I was feeling cozy, a little tipsy from the drinks we'd had earlier. We went to our separate rooms, Liam upstairs, me in a guest room on the first floor. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows, but the house was warm. I was starting to drift off when I heard something, soft, rhythmic tapping coming from the window. At first, I thought it was just the wind, or maybe a branch brushing the glass, but it didn't stop. Tap, tap, tap. Steady and deliberate, like someone was knocking. I sat up in bed, my heart thudding in my chest. It was strange, but I figured it was just an animal, maybe a raccoon or a bird's beak tapping against the glass. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and crept to the window. The light from the phone cast a pale glow on the yard, but there was no one there. I shined the light around the perimeter of the house. Nothing. Just the dark, silent forest. I pulled the blinds closed quickly, trying to shake off the weird feeling crawling up my spine. It had to be my imagination, right? Minutes later, I heard the tapping again, but this time it was coming from the door. Soft taps on the wooden frame. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just the wind. Someone, or something, was knocking on my door. I picked up my phone again and called Liam. He picked up almost immediately, his voice groggy. "What's up?" "Liam, are you messing with me?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "What do you mean? Messing with you? How? Are you knocking on my door?" There was a long pause, and I could hear Liam shifting in bed. "No, dude, I'm in bed." My skin prickled. I was sure I heard something, but now I felt like I was losing my mind. The knocking continued, almost louder now, like whoever was on the other side of the door was trying to get my attention. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't explain it, but something felt horribly wrong. The knocking stopped after a few minutes, but I couldn't sleep after that. My mind kept replaying the sound, wondering what it was, who or what was out there. The next morning I was still shaken, but Liam didn't seem to notice anything strange. He was in a good mood, talking about going for a hike and getting some fresh air. I didn't want to tell him what happened, not after the way he'd laughed it off. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about this place. After breakfast, we headed into the woods for a hike. The trees were thick and the trail narrow, and the deeper we went, the more I felt like I wasn't alone. It wasn't anything obvious, just a feeling, like someone was watching us from between the trees. It was unsettling, but I kept it to myself. Liam started telling me more stories about the cabin, things I hadn't heard before. strange occurrences. People who'd stayed there years ago and disappeared without a trace. He even mentioned a hermit, some guy who supposedly lived in the woods, a mysterious figure who had been seen watching the cabin from time to time but never interacted with anyone. It was all starting to feel off. We eventually came to a small clearing. In the center was a weathered, overgrown graveyard, the tombstones leaning and cracked. Liam mentioned it was part of his family's land, but it looked ancient, old enough to be forgotten. Something about it made my stomach twist, like we weren't supposed to be there. We walked around the graves for a bit, but then I heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind us, slow, deliberate. I turned, expecting to see Liam, but he was a few feet ahead of me. I looked around, but there was no one. Just trees, shadows stretching long in the fading light. I called out to Liam, but he didn't hear me. I was starting to feel a little panicked. The footsteps were still there, echoing softly behind me. But when I turned around, there was nothing. I quickened my pace, trying to catch up to him. When I finally reached him, he was standing still in the middle of the clearing, staring blankly ahead. His face was pale, almost like he was in a trance. I grabbed his arm. "Liam, what's wrong?" He blinked, shaking his head as if coming out of a daze. I don't know. I was just standing here, and then I heard something. Thought you were behind me." I didn't say anything, but my heart was racing. I didn't know what had just happened, but it didn't feel normal. The whole time we were walking back to the cabin, I felt eyes on me, like something was following us through the trees, just out of sight. That night, the knocking came again. But this time, it wasn't just on the window. It was everywhere. The door, the walls, the floorboards. Steady, rhythmic taps that echoed through the cabin. I could hear it as clear as day, and it was impossible to ignore. I didn't say anything to Liam. He was asleep, his back turned to me, and I didn't want to scare him. But I could feel it. The thing that had been knocking, watching, waiting. It was still out there. We left the cabin the next morning. I didn't say anything more to Liam about the knocking, about the footsteps in the woods, or the strange feeling that had settled over me like a heavy weight. But I haven't been back since. And even now, when I close my eyes, I can hear that tapping. Slow, deliberate, always just behind me. I wasn't supposed to be here. Not really. I had come to this sleepy coastal town on a whim, desperate for some peace after a particularly rough few months. Work had been draining, and personal life. Let's just say I needed a distraction. So when a friend suggested I take a weekend trip to the small town of Millstone Bay, I jumped at the chance. The town was like something out of a faded postcard. Old stone buildings, a pier that looked like it hadn't seen a boat in decades, and streets that barely saw any traffic. I rented a little cottage by the cliffs, a charming place with weathered shutters and an ocean view that stretched for miles. It seemed perfect for what I needed. Isolation, quiet, a chance to clear my head. The first evening was beautiful. The sun set in a slow, golden arc, casting long shadows over the beach and the waves lapping gently at the shore. I spent the evening walking along the beach, listening to the sound of the water, breathing in the salty air. It was peaceful, too peaceful maybe, but I wasn't complaining. I needed a break. But as the sky darkened, the air grew colder, and a dense fog began to roll in from the ocean. It crept across the shoreline, thick and suffocating, as if the land was being slowly swallowed by it. The weathered streetlights flickered in the distance, their glow barely visible through the thickening mist. The entire town seemed to fade into this soft, ghostly blur, and for a moment it felt like time itself was slowing down. I should have gone inside then. But the fog, like a quiet invitation, beckoned me further. I stood at the edge of the beach, the waves barely audible beneath the weight of the fog, when I noticed something strange. A figure, just a shadow at first, appeared on the pier. It was a woman, though her features were obscured by the mist. She stood there motionless, staring out at the horizon as if waiting for something. Or someone. I couldn't explain why, but a chill ran through me. Not the kind from the cold, but something deeper. Something that tugged at the edges of my thoughts, an instinct telling me that this wasn't a normal woman. I decided to ignore it, retreating to the warmth of the cottage and the comforting silence within. But that night, I heard something. A soft, persistent tapping. It started faintly, a light knock on the door, as though someone was gently tapping with their knuckles. I rolled over in bed, blinking into the darkness. I tried to shake off the feeling that something wasn't right. Maybe it was the wind, or the settling of the old house. But then the sound came again, this time louder. Tap, 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 as though someone was trying to get my attention. I swung my legs off the bed, my bare feet hitting the cool floor. I didn't want to open the door, but the curiosity gnawed at me. I walked to the window, pulling back the curtain slightly to peer outside. The fog had deepened, wrapping the entire world in an eerie cocoon. The streetlights were barely visible, their glow struggling against the dense white fog. I could see nothing beyond a few feet. But there, at the edge of the yard, stood the same figure from earlier. The woman. Her back was to me, her head tilted slightly, as if she was listening. But her presence felt wrong. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. Was she waiting for me to come outside? Was she calling me? For a long, silent moment, I just watched her. But then the door rattled again, more forcefully this time. Something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to stand here like a fool, wondering if the woman was real or some figment of my imagination. I opened the door. Nothing. The yard was empty. The fog clung to the ground like a living thing, crawling up the old stone steps of the porch. But the woman was gone. No trace of her anywhere. I stepped out, heart pounding, and moved cautiously to the edge of the yard. The only sound was the soft hiss of the fog shifting in the wind. There were no footsteps, no sign of anyone. But the moment I turned to go back inside, I heard a voice. "Don't be afraid," it said. Too calm, too quiet. My stomach turned. I spun around. There she was again, standing just a few feet away. Her face was now visible through the fog. She was much older than I had first realized, her face pale and drawn, her features sharp, as if time had eroded them. Her eyes, dark and hollow, locked onto mine. "You shouldn't have come here," she whispered, her voice like the soft lapping of water against a rock. "You've seen too much." I took a step back. "Who are you?" I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. She didn't answer at first. Instead, she stepped closer, her gaze never leaving mine. She reached out a hand, long fingers, nearly translucent in the dim light, and I felt a strange pull toward her. The cold from the fog seemed to emanate from her, seeping into my bones. "I told you," she said, her voice like a breath on the wind. "You weren't supposed to know." Before I could react, she vanished into the fog, as if the mist itself had swallowed her whole. I stumbled back, my heart racing, my mind whirling. I didn't understand what had just happened. Was she a ghost? A trick of the fog? My eyes were wide with disbelief, but the cold reality was setting in. I was not alone here. And whatever this woman was, she wasn't the only thing hiding in the fog. The night passed slowly, my mind replaying the encounter over and over. I didn't sleep at all. The wind howled outside, and the eerie, unnatural silence that followed the woman's departure hung like a weight in the room. The next morning, the fog hadn't lifted. It was as if the town had been completely trapped in it, the air thick and heavy. I could barely make out the outlines of the buildings from the window, the world reduced to a blur of grey and white. I went to the local inn to ask about the woman, thinking I might find some clue. The innkeeper, an elderly man named Mr. Carrington, greeted me with a polite but distant smile. When I mentioned the woman, his face tightened and his eyes darted to the window. "She comes in the fog," he said, his voice low and cautious. "Every year, always the same." "What do you mean?" I asked, now more confused than ever. He sighed, looking as though he were weighing whether or not to continue. "Millstone Bay is not what it seems. There's a history here, a dark one. People who were lost. And the woman? She's a reminder, a warning. But you're not from here, are you? You wouldn't understand." He refused to say more, but his words lingered in my mind. The woman, the fog, this town that felt stuck in some kind of forgotten time. Later that day, I took a walk through the town, trying to clear my head. Millstone Bay felt more like a living dream than a real place, something out of a faded photograph or a forgotten memory. There was no life here, no bustling shops or crowded streets, just quiet, emptiness. I found myself at the cemetery on the edge of town, the stones weathered and worn by time. It was the same place I had seen the woman earlier. The gate creaked open, and I walked slowly toward the center of the graveyard, the air growing colder, the fog even thicker. And then I saw her again. She stood at the far end of the cemetery, staring at a particular grave. This time, I saw the name on the headstone, Isabel Blackwell. The woman was muttering something under her breath. I approached cautiously, my steps tentative. "She's still waiting," the woman said, her voice barely a whisper. "The fog keeps them here, keeps them lost." I wanted to ask more. I wanted to understand. But when I looked up, the woman had vanished again, leaving behind only the grave and the fog, as though they were one and the same. It was then that I realized the fog wasn't just a weather phenomenon. It was a barrier, a veil between this world and something else. Something trapped here. The woman, Isabel Blackwell. Maybe she was the key. Or maybe she was one of many who had never left. I left Millstone Bay the next morning, unable to shake the feeling that I was being watched. As I drove away, I saw the fog, trailing behind me like a shadow. And as much as I tried to forget, I could still hear her voice echoing in my mind. "You weren't supposed to know. The woman in the fog was still out there, and the town of Millstone Bay. Well, it hadn't let me leave entirely. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more spine-chilling tales. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think is lurking out there in the fog? Share your ideas in the comments below. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and remember, sometimes the scariest things are the ones we can't see.